The following is an AZPM original production.
For AZPM, I'm Mark McLemore, and this is Arizona Spotlight. Coming up, meet Vince Kelly, the actor playing the part of Blanche Devereaux in the stage show Golden Girls, The Laughs Continue. Danielle Kamara talks to the co-director of a documentary about two women who escaped deportation by claiming sanctuary in houses of worship. A native plant expert shares some tips for helping your garden survive drought. And Christy Scheel honors the legacy of Diane Keaton. Those stories are next on Arizona Spotlight. The NBC sitcom The Golden Girls ran from 1985 to 1992 with 180 episodes. The show gained new life and wide popularity afterwards on cable and then streaming platforms. And the four central characters have been embraced by the queer community as icons. Today there are multiple stage adaptations and even a Golden Girls-themed cruise. A traveling show based out of Detroit called Golden Girls, The Laughs Continue, is visiting Tucson on Saturday, October 25th. It features an all-male cast doing female impersonation. Next, I'll talk with Vince Kelly, the actor who plays the character of Blanche Devereaux.
And I kind of got started with female impersonation through the theater. They were doing Rent, the musical, when Rent kind of became available for the regional theaters. And I was cast as Angel, and Angel in the show is, Angel's a lot of things. I guess at that time it was called something else. But at the end of the day, I had to wear a wig and some heels. And I was like, well, I've never done this before, but let's see how it goes. And then I just started really carving out a little niche for myself in theater, doing, La Cage aux Folles and Rent and Southern Baptist Sissies, just different shows where I had to use that very particular set of skills. And that brought me to Blanche.
How is it that the legacy of the Golden Girls has grown so much?
Yeah. It was just done so well initially that, things that are done well, things that are done lovingly, things with phenomenal actresses are going to be able to stand the test of time. But I think specifically, the Golden Girls had a lovely little third act, if you will, during COVID, during the lockdown. Hulu, which is very tight-lipped about, what people are watching, released
Right.
and said, during the pandemic, Golden Girls was collectively watched for, 23,000 million hours or something like that, crazy. So I think it was, it was an uneasy time, but watching the Golden Girls, watching your four favorite old lady friends was a nice way to calm and center and, bring you back to a nice, easier time and maybe remind you of, watching the show with your mom or something like that, or your grandmother. So I think we're able to offer that, just an extension of that great nostalgia.
I definitely watched The Golden Girls with my grandmother, and I think that The Golden Girls gives you hope that you will live long and prosper. That's
the crossover that we need, the Trekkies and the Golden Girls.
That, you don't have to quit being sexually positive. You don't have to quit being a control freak like Dorothy. Independent. You don't have to say goodbye to your mother in the case of Dorothy.
No.
And you can keep on being kind of dim if you're Rose.
Yes.
And it's going to be okay.
You can, what I think Rose's true journey is that you can keep being optimistic and you can keep looking for the absolute best in people.
That's a far better way to put it. Thank you, Vince. If you could ask Rue McClanahan a question, if you had a magic Ouija board and you could ask her a question, what might that be?
Oh my God. I've never, in 3 years, I've never been asked this question. That is such a solid question. Oh my God. I received as a gift this letter. It was from an interview that Rue McClanahan was doing where she was writing the responses back and forth. And this one page of the letter is, what advice would you emphasize to children who are deciding to enter this challenging and sophisticated way of life, such as performing and stuff like that? And she gave this wonderful response. She said, go for it. keep an eye on the donut, not the hole. And I thought that was so great. So I feel like, is there a million questions I want to ask her? Yes. I feel like through her own words and the research that I've done, I've kind of gotten to know so much about her and what she kind of was hoping to craft her legacy for. So I feel like I would just ask her something stupid like, what brand of shoes did you wear? Because I want to buy them or something.
How do you find the donut when all you can see is the hole?
I know. Which I thought was a pretty fun Blanche-like response as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Have you had an amazing moment of contact with a Golden fan that you want to share?
Oh my God, so many. Yeah. I, like yourself, my grandmother is my introduction to it. I debuted the same year as the Golden Girls. We both came out in 1985. Golden Girls just a few weeks older than me. But, at the height of their popularity, I remember being 5, 6, 7 years old, and I spent a lot of time with my grandmother, especially on Friday nights. My mom would go out and have a good time with her girlfriends, and I'd be with Nana, and I would say, let's watch Old Lady Show. I didn't get the jokes, but she was having a great time and laughing along, so it's always tied with that. I always get a little, our show is fun, and it's riot, and people are laughing, and we have this great opportunity to do meet and greets with super fans on the stage, in our living room on the old couch. And people will say, my grandmother's no longer with me, and this was like our show, and we used to watch it all the time together. And being able to be here was like spending an extra 2 hours with her. And, I never thought I'd get that back or get that again or something. And it's just so nice because that's kind of how I feel sometimes when we're doing the show. Not all the time, maybe, but sometimes, I'll be like, something will remind me of her. She passed away just about a year ago. And something will just remind me of her, and I'll be like, she's here. We're doing the show. I'm doing the show for her. She's here tonight. It's nice that people have that connection to the show, and, we can give them a new episode that they haven't seen before.
Vince, tell our listeners what the audience might expect. Because when I first heard about the show, I thought, well, this is going to be like Greatest Hits from the sitcom. But that's not the case.
No, yeah. There are some other Golden Girls tribute shows, which are wonderful. And they will do an episode, or they'll take a few and kind of put them together and stuff like that. Our show is an all-new original script. We took the formula, the ingredients of your favorite Golden Girls episode, and we brought them to 2025. It's modern day. The girls have just kept on going. They're still living together. We pretend like the last episode didn't happen. We breeze right through that. And then, and they're still just in Miami, kicking it, having a good time in their house that looks, exactly the same, like every good sitcom should. The thing that sets our show apart from your regular tribute show is that our Golden Girls are no longer on, network television. We don't have to listen to standards and practices. We are HBO Max. We're on, Hulu or something. So we're into some situations that the Golden Girls themselves would have reveled in had they been given the opportunity. But our show is 18 plus. We're ready to have a good time. I mean, a foundational plot point of our show is that Rose and Blanche have developed an app for seniors to find, we'll say, companionship, after dark. So that's kind of the vibe of our show. So we want everyone to come, and you're going to say, oh my God, I never heard Betty White say that. Well, I think, Betty White definitely said it, but you definitely never heard Rose say it because, they wouldn't allow that language on television. So it's super fun to get to hear, it's almost like you're watching the bloopers almost.
Vince Kelly, I'd like to ask you, can you define for our casual audience a little bit of what you find is different between female impersonation and drag?
Absolutely. Drag is a persona. Drag is created by an artist. It's a political statement. It's a protest. And I love and support those artists so much that I wouldn't even want to insult them by saying that me reading a script and putting on heels is what they do. I'm given an outline of what I need to say. I don't get to invent or become somebody else. I'm portraying a character who was created by a wonderful actress. It's a loose interpretation. We do our best and we try to stay true to the show and who they were. But, we get a little crazy as to where drag is. Someone has handcrafted from the ground up a new personality and a new persona. And that's just, it's not what we're doing.
I spoke with Vince Kelly from his home in Detroit, Michigan. Golden Girls, The Laughs Continue will be on stage at the Linda Ronstadt Music Hall on Saturday, October 25th. A new documentary exploring the impact of one of the less discussed aspects of United States immigration policy is screening in Tucson at the Moroni Theater at 2 p.m. on Sunday, October 26th. It's presented by Docscapes, a program of the University of Arizona's School of Theater, Film, and Television. Here with an interview with the film's co-director is AZPM's senior reporter for border issues, Danielle Kamara.
The sanctuary movement is the central issue of the story, which presents a snapshot of immigration policy and how two undocumented women were treated before the start of the second Trump administration. The film was co-directed by Florencia Krochek and my guest, Theo Rigby.
Si Pudiera Quedarme, or If I Could Say, is a feature documentary about two mothers that have deportation orders, and essentially instead of reporting to ICE and getting deported, they make this very difficult decision to go into quote-unquote sanctuary within two different churches in the Denver Boulder area, where at the time ICE was not enforcing deportations within the walls of houses of worship. You know, once they enter, they don't exit until they figure out their legal status, or until they adjust their legal status and have some sort of legal safety. Ingrid and Jeanette are the two protagonists of the film, and they both have 3 kids who were born in this country, and they go into these two churches not knowing, whether it'll be days, weeks, months, or most likely years before they're actually able to exit, to leave the church. We filmed for over the course of about 5 years, and the film took about 8 years to make, following Jeanette, Ingrid, their families, as well as the allied communities, the faith communities that are there as their host congregation, and followed the allied community's journey as well, trying to figure out, how to be the best ally possible. Sometimes we saw great allyship, sometimes we saw very poor allyship, and the point of the film, I think, now is to, 1, share Jeanette and Ingrid's stories, but then 2, also be kind of this call for allied communities of all sorts to figure out how to best do social justice work, how to best support immigrant communities in the healthiest way possible right now.
There was one line that I noted down that Jeanette said, which was, "Sanctuary isn't a favor, it's an act of social justice." She goes on to talk about how in every congregation there's 2 or 3 people who think they know best, that the white people know best. And she talks about the importance for her about being able to take control of her life and not have other people be dictating to her how she should manage her life and her time in sanctuary.
This type of sanctuary, this type of physical sanctuary, for everybody, especially Jeanette and Ingrid and their families, is very difficult. And is one reason why it's not happening all that much today, in addition to, the sensitive location policy being rescinded earlier this year. For Jeanette and Ingrid, they are immigrants, they are undocumented, they have orders of deportation, they are mothers, they are people of color, they are native Spanish speakers and speak a bit of English, but it's not the language that they are comfortable with. And they, are both low income as well. And the communities that they're going into are almost the complete opposite, right? Pretty affluent, mostly white, mostly monolingual English speaking. There's a lot of difference there, and there's a lot of learning that kind of needed to happen kind of on the allied side, in terms of just kind of who these people are and what they're going through. And, the allied community, communities that are part of the dominant culture in this country being English speaking, white, and then this community specifically being fairly affluent and having a good degree of positional power just in society and culture, they are often used to feeling like they have the answers, feeling like they know what to do and that they have the resources to do it. Sometimes that's true. And in this situation, it can also, at the same time, lead to this kind of tendency to white saviorism, which I think is what Jeanette is talking about. In the film, she talks about how there are some people who are incredible and who are very close to her and who listen to her and to allies who let Jeanette lead and to listen to Jeanette and to listen to what she is asking for. And then there are other folks who kind of put their view of the world and view of what should happen and control kind of on top of her in this white savior kind of method. And that's what she's reacting to, and was very difficult. Sometimes this scenario kind of plays out going through those difficulties and kind of coming out the other side a lot stronger and a lot closer. It can also kind of dissolve and become incredibly difficult, and conflict can be really tough. It can resolve in people moving out. That's really, I think, in terms of filmmaking and storytelling and sharing those stories, that's where the real growth happens. That's where the real cultural and societal change happens. And that's really how our community moves from, where we are today to a much, much more welcoming and embracing community for our immigrant communities across the country.
You had mentioned that the policy has changed under the current Trump administration about places of worship being able to be a place of sanctuary. You did your filming a few years ago, but how have the most recent policy changes changed that movement? Is sanctuary and places of worship still an option for people?
Absolutely. Houses of worship have been sanctuaries since biblical times for thousands of years. Right now, the sensitive locations policy that was in place during the Obama administration, during the first Trump administration, during the Biden administration, and now has been rescinded in, I believe it was in January of this year, said that ICE will not enforce deportation in houses of worship, also in schools, in hospitals, in courthouses. Although that has been taken away, it's a good reminder that the sanctuary movement in the 1980s was founded in part in southern Arizona, and houses of worship provided sanctuary and transportation and resources and media interviews to refugees from Central America. There was no sensitive locations policy during the sanctuary movement in the 1980s, all the way up until first Obama administration, and now there isn't anymore. So there's always, a certain set of risks involved in doing sanctuary work for faith communities, where ICE does not have that memo anymore that says you should not. It wasn't a law. It was a memo that it was just a policy that says they should not enforce deportation within houses of worship. And although that's taken away, what's true for houses of worship is true for any private business, in that when you are in a private space that is not a public space and the door is locked, ICE cannot enter that premises unless they have a warrant signed by a federal judge, not an ICE judge. So immigrants are still considering going into physical sanctuary in certain scenarios. Now, sanctuary congregations, when they're considering doing this, they need to have an immigration lawyer hired and, on retainer working with them. You can expect ICE to show up at the church where you're taking sanctuary. During Jeanette and Ingrid's time, during past administrations, that was not the case. There were always precautions, but there weren't many people that were really expecting ICE to kind of show up at the house of worship where they knew someone was taking sanctuary.
The fact that these women kind of give up their quote unquote American dream in hopes that their children can have theirs. What did you learn in making this film about the experience of their children, and what do you hope viewers take from the documentary about the lives of these children?
Every immigrant family that I have met, every immigrant parent that I've met has not only sacrificed, but just focused and loved and cared for and tried so incredibly hard to provide for their children what they didn't have, while also trying to provide a lot of what they did have as children and a lot of the amazing cultural and social elements of the families that they had growing up in whatever native country that they came from.
Before beginning to tell the story covered in Si Pudiera Quedarme, co-director Theo Rigby says he researched the origins of the sanctuary movement, which reaches back to the 1980s at the Southside Presbyterian Church in Tucson. At that time, the church was led by Pastor John Fife, who later co-founded the humanitarian aid organization No More Deaths.
And the sanctuary movement spread across the country, supporting thousands of refugees. And eventually the Reagan administration thought it was enough of a problem to have the FBI informant infiltrate the small group in Tucson that eventually led to the sanctuary trials, where a small group of pastors, reverends, nuns, and a couple lay people were indicted and tried. And John Fife was one of those people. This is a core kind of a story of Southern Arizona, of the allied community coming together at great risk to serve the migrants that were arriving on their doorstep the best that they could.
Si Pudiera Quedarme will have a screening at 2 p.m. on Sunday, October 26th at the Maroney Theater on the U of A campus. It is free and open to the public. For Arizona Spotlight, I'm Danielle Camara.
Despite some welcome rainfall in recent weeks, you may have noticed some plants struggling for survival in our desert and urban areas. Next, Tony Paniagua speaks with Carrie-Ann Funicelli, a native plant expert who founded a business called Strategic Habitat Enhancements in 2019 to connect local residents with native plants that are adapted to our harsh climate.
Carrie-Ann Funicelli, thank you very much for joining us.
Absolutely. It's a pleasure to talk with you today.
I have heard over and over from people that some of their plants are struggling either in their yard or across the street or throughout the city. What's been going on this summer?
My goodness. This summer has been the culmination of 3 missed rainy seasons in a row. The winter rains were lackluster at best. And this monsoon, we've had some real drought stacking conditions that have made it difficult. Plants that can go through this maybe one dry season and be resilient to it have been kind of knocked back again and again and again. So it gets to a point where it puts even native plants at the edges of their physiological capabilities to deal with these conditions repeatedly.
What if people say, well, they're cactus or it's a native mesquite? They're used to it. That's not necessarily the case, especially if you want healthy, thriving plants on your property. Is that correct?
Absolutely. If you go for a hike in the natural desert right now, you'll see that our native plants are struggling in wild populations. And so, we will lose some of those native plants as well. They will succumb to this repeated stress. Now, in our yards, we can combat that. We can help these plants along. We can give them some extra water at critical times and at critical depths to, make sure that they remain healthy and a part of our functioning urban ecology. So I'm finding that if we want to use these plants, if I'm installing the new ones, I'm very, very careful about where I locate them. And it's different than where I may have located them even 6 years ago. So I'm looking for locations that have only morning sun or that have a little bit of filtered light shade throughout the day. And I'm making sure that the watering is adequate to keep them happy as well. Another thing that can be helpful is ensuring that we're installing plants in gentler times, right? So fall and winter is a good time. Spring starts to get dicey. If you're installing some of these plants in what gardeners generally think of as really great time, you want to plant in the spring. Well, our springs are getting hotter and they're getting earlier. So spring becomes late February.
Yes.
But,
no longer March or April.
Yeah, but planting in general, I think it's really great if you can think about maximizing the time that a new plant can be in the ground and get used to its new surroundings before it has to go through those really hard, hot times of April. Late April is getting really hot. May and June. Even, if we're having a really good monsoon, you can start planting as soon as July if it's not like the last couple of years.
You keep track of blooming plants throughout the year, and in September or in the fall, you have noticed a big difference this year versus last year or years before.
Absolutely. So one of my favorite ways to plan a project is to write my list of species that I want to use out, and I format it as a bloom calendar so I can see what the flower color is and when it might be blooming, and I can make sure that I have the whole year covered because that's the best thing to do for pollinators. So I draw that information from botanical literature, and as I said, the climate's changing, so some of that literature was written decades ago. And so I became really curious about what's actually happening in my yard, my Tucson yard, versus what's in the literature. So about 6 years ago, I started collecting data on the 5th and the 20th of every month. I write down everything that's blooming in my yard. And I have pages and pages of handwritten notes about this. One day I'm going to have to get serious and enter it all in. But anyway, I have this all written down on a clipboard on my desk. This year I've noticed that, boy, I call them my phenology walks around my yard. I'm like, my phenology walks are getting very quick because there's not a lot blooming. And I know that it has felt like, wow, where are all the flowers this summer? Normally, my yard just looks amazing. My last one the one on the 5th of September was when I really noticed it. I was like, you know what, I should go back to last year and see. And I went back all 6 years, and I saw that normally my mean number of blooming plants was something like 40 on the 5th of September, and it ranged anywhere from like 30 to 60. This year it was 24. And so I'm like, wow, I'm not imagining this. This really is something. And it's certainly something I've been hearing from my clients too. You said we were going to have lots of color in our yard, Carrie Ann. And, we will again. It will rain again. And we can help that out as well with maintaining our plants, to their level of health. But it is concerning, and, I sure do hope that we have some good rains this winter to help our plants recover from 3 seasons in a row of really tough conditions.
Some people see plants that are struggling. They may be inclined to try to remove them or just get rid of them or replace them. What do you say about that? You use an analogy talking about a bad hair day.
I do. I think that at the end of a long, hot summer like we've had, it's a bad time to judge a plant and how well it's doing. It's kind of like, do you have a good hair day 365 days a year? Probably not. And so instead of judging these plants and how well they're doing at the very worst time of year after 3 really hard seasons, we might want to give it a chance to rebound a little bit. And with native plants particularly, they can look dead. And if you give them some time, and the weather eases up, and you're sure your irrigation is working, they'll come back.
So study up on the plans and pick the right location and maybe contact an expert.
Yeah, I'm always around for that.
All right. Thank you so much for joining us. It's been a pleasure.
Absolutely. Thanks, Tony.
For more information from Carrie Ann Funicelli, including a free bloom calendar, you can visit her website at strategichabitats.com, or there's a link on the Spotlight page at azpm.org. Actor, director, producer, author, photographer, style icon, and one-time Tucson resident, Diane Keaton, passed away on Saturday, October 11th. Here is film essayist Chris DeShiel with a remembrance. DeShiel is an outside contributor to this show, and his opinions are his own.
There are actors who inspire an emotional connection with us, especially if they were prominent during a certain time in our lives. I never met Diane Keaton, although she owned a home in Tucson for a few years, but her film performances made it seem as if I knew her. When I heard she died recently at the age of 79, it hurt, although I recognize she lived a full and satisfying life. The truth is, I knew her through the variety of her work, which involved not just one persona, but many. There was a personal element she brought to the screen that persisted in all or most of her characters, a smart, compassionate, independent, vigorous, and funny woman who made her own choices. Her first big role was in The Godfather, and she was especially good in The Godfather Part 2 as the lovely, naive, wholesome wasp in the midst of a Sicilian-American criminal clan the perfect contrast. Of course, the first thing we think of is Annie Hall, which won her an Oscar. She did a total of 8 films with her friend Woody Allen, starting with Play It Again, Sam, Sleeper, and Love and Death, the last one a favorite of mine, in which she plays a ridiculous Russian pseudo-intellectual right out of a Dostoevsky novel. She could play the screwiest of screwballs in Allen's comedies, but she had a great flair for comedy in general and was able to go deeper into a humorous character such as Erica Berry, the romantically disappointed heroine of 2003's Something's Gotta Give. But I need to mention Keaton's dramatic roles, lesser known but well worth seeing. She took a risk playing the lead in Looking for Mr. Goodbar in 1977, based on a controversial book about a promiscuous young woman. It was demanding, and the performance is powerful, even though the film is a mixed bag. She really stood out in Warren Beatty's epic historical drama Reds, playing the journalist Louise Bryant. She was the wife caught in a scary marriage with Albert Finney in Shoot the Moon. She played a radical recruited as a spy in The Little Drummer Girl in '84, and in the same year, the brave but delusional wife of the warden in a Prison Break film based on real events called Mrs. Soffel. Crimes of the Heart showed her skill at ensemble work as one of 3 sisters, the other 2 played by Jessica Lange and Sissy Spacek. She also directed 3 feature films, including the fascinating 1987 documentary Heaven. There are too many other examples to name. Surely that's enough, but Keaton was also a fine singer, mostly on stage, but in a few of her films as well, and once memorably on The Tonight Show. By all accounts, she was a kind person, honest and insightful. On screen, she was most of all an image of intelligence and beauty. Her vulnerability felt real. Well, I might as well say it. I had a crush on her, but more than that, a deep admiration. I will miss her presence in our lives. For Arizona Spotlight, this is Krista Shield.
Thank you for listening to Arizona Spotlight. This show is a production of AZPM. The production engineer is Jim Blackwood. I'm producer and host Mark McLemore.
AZPM podcasts are made possible in part by donations from listeners like you. Learn more at support.azpm.org. Thank you.